In the top stories, BWA announces a ban on some forms of water use, 500 lots available for purchase by squatters, and drug screening and polygraph tests keeping some out of the BDF. Welcome to Nation News for Friday, February 26, 2016. I'm Natasha Beckles.
Private and public sector leaders, Barbados' best employers, BBE, is back. Organizations, large or small, private or public sector, enter BBE 2016 now. Benefit from an independent staff survey and much more. All interested in improving staff engagement and productivity, here is the catalyst to get you moving. Our theme, Maximizing Productivity, Building a Better Barbados. To enter, visit our website or call us at Caribbean Catalyst.
In an apparent response to ongoing water scarcity, the Barbados Water Authority has announced a 3-month ban on the use of water for certain purposes. Effective March 1st, a number of water-intensive practices will be prohibited, including irrigation or watering of gardens, lawns and grounds, filling or supplying tanks, ponds, baths or swimming pools, and washing roadways, pavements or vehicles by hose. The ban does not apply to dipping tanks for cattle, domestic baths not exceeding 120 litres in capacity, or elevated tanks not exceeding 800 litres in capacity and connected to household sewage or water supply systems. In a notice issued on Friday, the BWA said it is an offence to contravene this prohibition, and individuals are liable on summary conviction to a fine of $500 or imprisonment for 1 month. Minister of Housing and Lands, Dennis Kelman, says government has set aside 500 lots for squatters, and he is urging those who are occupying land illegally to hurry to the National Housing Corporation to get the lots at $5 per square foot. Speaking in the House of Assembly on Friday, Mr. Kelman said this means the squatters could get a lot for as little as $18,000. The St. Lucie MP told the chamber government has committed to finding solutions to the problem of squatting, particularly in the Belle St. Michael area, which threatens one of the island's largest underground water sources. Although labour officers carry out scheduled and unannounced visits to workplaces, the onus is on employees to report any breaches. In a recent interview with Nation News, Senior Labour Officer Wayne Sobers said this means they first have to be aware of their rights.
Even though that is the approach that we take, the real onus is on the employee, first of all, to know his rights, and then secondly, to seek to enforce those rights. And if he can't enforce them through dialogue with his employer, he has every right under the Labour Department Act and under the Employment Rights Act to make a representation to the Chief Labour Officer to have any difficulties he's having at work, have those investigated. But it starts with worker empowering himself through knowledge. You see, we do recognize that it's quite difficult when you look at the number of officers and the range of duties that we perform. It's quite difficult for us to inspect every single business. We do random checks, but really and truly, we want to put the onus on the worker to identify when his rights are being breached and to contact the Labour Department.
Mr. Sobers said they have seen an increase in the number of unfair dismissal complaints since the introduction of the Employment Rights Act. The Barbados Defence Forces recruitment drive, which began early this month, has so far resulted in 77 recruits. However, a number of unsuitable applicants were weeded out because of the zero-tolerance policy against tattoos or during drug screening or polygraph testing. Records Officer Lieutenant Commander Fernella Cordell did not disclose how many applicants were rejected, but said there were still some vacancies. She was speaking to Nation News on Friday following the graduation ceremony for an Information Technology Systems Technologist course. The Caribbean Development Bank is warning that the reduction in correspondent banking relationships will stifle economic growth in Caribbean states like Barbados. President Dr. Warren Smith and Director of Economics Dr. Justin Ram say urgent action will be required to prevent the issue from causing further damage to regional economies. A correspondent bank is a financial institution that provides services on behalf of another financial institution. A number of foreign banks have withdrawn from such relationships with regional banks. Dr. Ram predicted that trading relations and remittances from sources outside the Caribbean would be affected.
I think that what really needs to happen is that we need to have a dialogue, perhaps at the political level, between our leaders here in the Caribbean and those with our major trading partners, particularly in the United States. So I mean that at this point in time, some of the measures that are being touted as being what can actually be utilized to alleviate this problem with respect to correspondent banking, as Dr. Smith mentioned, perhaps central banks stepping in, but that might not be efficient. What really needs to happen is a policy dialogue, so that we could probably have a more greater risk-based approach to this. Because without that dialogue and what we currently have in place, it's actually going to be a real stifle on economic activity.
Attorney General Adriel Brathwaite has reiterated that crime has not reached runaway levels, although he is concerned about the use of firearms. He made the comments during an address to the Men's Educational Support Association.
Statistically, when one looks at what happened last year, more or less reflected what has been happening in Barbados over the last 5 or 6 years. Now, one of the things that we tend to do is that we tend to compare years. So last year we would have said that was a 50% increase in crime. But that is against a situation where in 2014 there was actually a 14% increase in crime. So if one looks at it, if you extrapolate it and look at it over 5 or 6 years, what happened last year was really just a reflection of the level of crime that we would have had in Barbados over the last 5 or 6 years. The caveat I made, as I said, that the one concern is the level of gun-related crimes, which concern us immensely.
And finally, a severely obese woman in Wales has had a house specially built for her because she can't fit in her current one. But her neighbors are already complaining. They say the house is too close to 13 takeaway restaurants. 22-year-old Georgia Davis, who weighs 840 pounds, was given the £150,000 property, which will be paid for out of her benefits. It has been specially designed with a double front door and widened rooms and corridors. But neighbors believe its location will just encourage her to eat more. And that's Nation News for Friday. For more news, log on to nationnews.com as well as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to pick up your papers over the weekend or subscribe to our e-paper. And look out for the weekend buzz a little later. Thank you so much for joining us.